Hi there, and welcome back to our fourth installment of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. We are thrilled again to be talking and joined with the fabulous Zheala Qayyum, who is a psychiatrist who works with children and adolescents, which is a perfect match for today's movie as we see the trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, blossoming into more adolescence, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's here.
It's here. The Yule Ball has arrived.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. All of their hormones and, like jealousies and insecurities and kind of leaning into crushes is like kind of portrayed all throughout the movie. And it gives you all the feels.
interesting.
Yeah. But the movie does start darkly. Fun, but the Quidditch World Cup, right? And gets very dark very quickly. I love the showing of the Quidditch World Cup, all the tents and how they travel there. I think it's just a whole new way of magic depicted on the screen. And then, right, the Death Eaters come. I thought it was making me think of like the Ku Klux Klan members,
Yes,
with
I
their
thought the
pointy
same
hoods
thing.
and the black
I
capes.
thought the
And
same
I think
thing.
that was like kind of perfect, to be honest, with like bigotry and the classism and racism and, dirty blood and pure blood. And I thought that was really well done, but really dark. So this movie definitely takes a darker turn.
Really quickly. It also reminded me of like mass casualty events. Like it was like really scary.
Yeah. And then you also see British versus non-British, European versus not, the sense of otherness, like now the Death Eaters are coming through, and like you said, Muggles, mudbloods. I think this movie really highlighted, and I think the book even more so, the sense of otherness, because that part about Dobby and the elves wasn't really played out as much in the movie as much as it was in the books about even slavery.
Yeah. And Hermione's, starts the club, right? SPEW.
Yeah.
Which is like, not a great acronym, but it gets the job done in her work for, right, like freeing house elves. And yeah, I think even in that way, it's really highlighted throughout the whole movie, kind of in every scene. I mean, I feel like there's some even with the other schools, right? Seeing other magic students from across the world, seeing what they're like and what they're into and their strengths and how they even arrive. Like it's so different.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I think this is we say this every episode, but I think this is my favorite movie. And I'll say it again next time too.
Yep.
But yeah.
Same. As we were watching it, I was like, oh no, this one's my favorite. Like this was the one that's my favorite. I love the Yule Ball. I think because like we all remember what that was like to be that age and going to your first dance and how like awkward it is. And I loved when Professor McGonagall was trying to teach, show them how to do the dance. The girls like jump up, they can't wait, and all the boys are just sitting there like, what?
Right.
And it's like just so typical,
Like
So
hiding,
Yeah, like they don't wanna. And how cute it was that like Ron and Harry were so nervous to ask anyone to go with them. And, we see Ron starting to have romantic feelings for Hermione and not knowing what to do. We see Harry with Cho, not knowing what to do. It's just all like very sweet and innocent. But then like so intense, like when Hermione at the end of the Yule Ball's crying and like rips off her high heel. Like it's so like you could really feel it.
Yeah, so real again. And I think it feels so relatable, like having a crush and having a crush who doesn't like you back, being disappointed, being excited for an experience and it not living up to expectations. I think it's just that tender age of like new love and feelings and not knowing how to handle them or what to do or how to communicate, and just that whole mess that I think in some ways is so beautiful and also like it's so hard, it's a challenge to live
And
through.
again, like another reason why I love Hermione, because she's like giving it to Ron. He was like so rude the way he asked her to the dance, being like, it looks even worse for a girl to show up with them. Like, how rude of him to assume that no one had asked her, let alone like the stud,
Right. And then also the sort of the jealousy that he feels when he sees her with Victor Crumb.
Yeah.
And rather than being honest about his feelings, like he was hurtful, like you're fraternizing with the enemy. And I think this is kind of where you see their attachment styles really play out. Like Harry avoids it till the last moment,
Yes.
till he gets turned down by Cho. And then you kind of wonder, and I think this is more in the book as well, where you're thinking, how does he feel about Cedric now when he sees the ball with Cho? And how that plays out in their trials. And you see like Ron's anxiety and anxious, ambivalent attachment, like he wants to do this, but he doesn't want to do this. And now
Yeah.
he likes her, but he's pulling away. And rather than telling her that he likes her, he's actually angry at her and is mean towards her. And then you see, Hermione's really secure attachment coming through with, if you're not valuing me, I'm going off with someone who will. And I'm setting appropriate boundaries. And yes, I have unpleasant, uncomfortable feelings, and I'm not afraid to experience them or show them, because it's okay. And her previous life experience would have sort of set the stage for, we will tolerate your emotions and it's okay. And it's okay for you to feel it and show it appropriately, which is probably where Ron's emotions in being sixth kid out of 7 kids is kind of lost in the sort of the chaos and the noise of that household, where the only time he's heard is when he gets into trouble or does something wrong. So he does not know how to come close and stay close.
Right.
And you see that play out in his friendship
with Harry.
With Harry.
Right. And we even see Harry feeling jealous of Cedric, right? Like I liked that we started to see Ron being jealous of Harry, because of course he would be at some point. But then it also shows like even the person you think is at the top will have these normal feelings. Like it's all part of being a human or a wizard, I guess. They have feelings too.
Yeah. And thinking of like Ron, right, in an earlier book when he sees himself in the mirror of Arise, you see him, right, like receiving all of this fanfare and being honored like by his family and, you know, head boy and important. And I think this now movie shows and highlights like his vulnerabilities. You know, his dress robes are older, and then his distrust and feeling like Harry betrayed him when, you know, he suspects that Harry went behind his back and puts his name in the goblet to get pulled, as really like wanting that fanfare and you know, importance, and seeing that that's where he's really insecure. I think this book does like a good job of getting that a little deeper, like reminding of us of all their personalities and all of their kind of baggage that they're bringing to the table.
And that they're trying to figure it out. Like even Hermione and Crumb, when she's saying to Harry, like, you know, he doesn't have a lot to say. He just kind of watches me study. Like you can tell she's like bored with the jock, I guess we could call him.
Right.
She needs a little more intellect there. And like, of course she does, but she's figuring it out. But like, good for her for figuring it out and listening to her own sort of authentic reactions. And, you know, I like to see a girl like doing that on my screen. I liked that.
Yeah. Oh, so what should we talk about? I mean, not first, but like now. I mean, I guess just like that maybe the darkness that's kind of brought in feels greater in this movie. You know, the Death Eaters in the beginning. We know that everyone seems just like a little bit older and knows more about the world, and like that there are dark forces out there. I feel like we did see that in the other books, but they felt like you were saying, Zheala, that it was resolved at the other movies. So maybe kind of talking a little bit about that.
Yeah. That this was, I think, for me, where not only does the end, like the start was darker, right? Before we usually started the Dursleys, which is not to say that it's not dark in its
just
own
in a different way, kind of,
But this is where you start with Nagini and Voldemort and Wormtail and somebody's death. And then you sort of end with somebody's death rather than Buck being rescued or the Basilisk being defeated or, you know, Quirrell being defeated. This was not about victory this time around. This was loss. And I think this is one thing where I also, when I was seeing this, it also reminded me of Hunger Games. I was like, this is like mythology. You know, we have trials, we have
Yes.
quests, this is a tournament, they have champions, and then you have all those sort of mythological objects like the invisibility cloak, and it's almost like Herculean tasks.
Right.
You know, these are your magical powers and your assets, and then you have to go prove yourself.
In like a very intense way, though, like really dangerous.
Where people die.
Yeah.
And I think the parallel to that's the real world. Like you're seeing, like we were saying, mass casualties about what the darkness can do. And then I think another thing to think about is the parallel that they've drawn between the Death Eaters now, because now they're at the forefront. They are one category of evil, and they've sort of defined it much more clearly now. And then you have very clearly the reaction and response through Dumbledore and Harry and the crew about how are you going to face it, and whether it's as a personal level between people and their individual relationships and their friendships and family, which you also see with the Weasleys coming together to support each other, and even Harry throughout the tournament. And then you also see how Lord Voldemort is coming in, and his leadership style, his followers, and their sort of internal relationships and patterns of engaging, which I think they made a very stark contrast in all of this.
Yeah, really like fear-based. I feel like even if if you are like a Death Eater, yes, you're buying into this ideology that you believe is true for this greater cause, but your leader is not like safe. Like he could find fault with you for anything and kill you, versus like having a conversation about it like we see with Dumbledore, or, expressing emotions, or not killing someone because they got something, made a mistake, or they knew something that they shouldn't have, like the elderly man at the beginning of the movie. I think it's so black and white, literally. I mean, literally, figuratively, in just how it's defined. And I think that makes it easy for kids, maybe not like 5-year-olds, like third, fourth, at their age, I think they're like 13, 14 in the movie. It just kind of this new way of looking at the world, where there's terrible things that happen, and learning that, and like, how do you accept that? How do you pick a side? I feel like sides are drawn in this movie.
And it's scary because it's like the adults can't protect you. I feel like we really start to see it. And I also started to get mad at the adults, because like, why would you send these wizards in for this tournament where they could die? Like, why are we doing this to these kids? And like, why do we still send Harry in, even though we know he's too young? Like, I started to get really mad at Dumbledore, I have to say, and a lot of the adults, but like, but then I guess that is kind of also reality, that, adults can't always protect you. And yet I was like, ugh, I don't know. I wouldn't want to send my kids to Hogwarts. Like, do parents know what's going on? Do they get like a Friday newsletter? I don't think so.
I mean, I think part of it is like the culture and normalization of what is appropriate and accepted. But I think it also talks about adults being flawed and far from perfect, and yet having to make tough decisions. And I think that's where you kind of see Dumbledore, not protect Harry, sending him and Cedric to their death, literally, but also that upholding what is right and modeling it. Like, this is how it's done. It's written, or whatever the pact for the Triwizard Tournament is, that whoever goes has to go. And therefore, because whatever understanding there is, you follow the rule. And even though it's a difficult decision to make, you'll do the right thing. So I know, and I think that's where the gray comes in, is things aren't always black and white. Even though they've drawn sides and they've made good and evil, and yet within it, people are flawed, and there's a lot of gray and tough decisions to be made. And I think that's exactly where you see these 14-year-olds find themselves, is that their choices, their options, and their And I think Dumbledore says it in the end, between when it's a choice between what is right and what is easy.
Right.
And I think they've sort of played that throughout, that
Mm-hmm.
doing what's right is not always easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. We also see Harry getting some support from Sirius in this movie. You know, he goes to him very vulnerably, saying like, "I don't think I can do this. I'm not ready for it." And you know, Sirius is hearing him. You know, I think we know what's coming in the future movies, but I think that Sirius is just such a wonderful support for Harry to have in his life at this moment. And you know, I wish it was forever.
And his parents come to him too.
Exactly.
You know, when he really needs them, or at least their memory or something. It wasn't totally clear to us, but I just love that sort of depiction of attachment as well, that you know, the parents come to when you really need it, or their memory or what they've taught you, like that bond, you know. Zheala, I don't know if you know the book, you might, The Invisible String. Do you know that book? Oh, I love that book. It's so beautiful, and like it reminded me of that, you know. That's a book about, you know, little kids learning that, you know, you're always connected to people you love even when you're not physically together. So we read that a lot in my house, not so much as my kids have gotten older and I hope have internalized that, but it reminded me of that. And how you know, it reminded me of Moana when we see her grandmother come to her in her time of need, that, you know, that was really beautiful. And that, you know, Harry has that on his side even when he's scared and feels really alone.
Exactly. And I think you kind of see Harry feel alone in a lot of ways. And for him, because he did not have that sort of physical parental support, you see these figures emerge as Dumbledore being a mentor and Sirius being a fatherly figure, and Hagrid in his own way being a dear friend. But you also see that appropriately for these adolescents, friends are filling such an important space in his world, where friendships are even more important. He needs those adults, and balancing both, like bringing both in and knowing that both relationships are complicated, and yet now you're seeing Harry navigate what he doesn't have or didn't have growing up, and now it's coming into his life, both in terms of friendship and support. And I think this goes to the point we were making before about loyalty and fear, that Harry's friends are honest. Their friendship is based on honesty. Where Ron gets upset at Harry because he feels like Harry lied to him, or he wasn't being honest or truthful, and moves out. And that actually is a good thing about a friendship, that it's not coercion. It's not fear, like you have to stay and be friends with me, which you see sort of in the mouth.
Right. See if she comes back.
Okay. That happened right as I like maximized my screen. So at first I was like, did I kick her out? I'm sure she will.
Yeah. All right, I'm just gonna make a note. 19 minutes.
Sorry, I'm back.
Hello. That's okay.
Yeah, no problem. We can just cut this part out.
It's weird. My whole window shut down.
Weird.
All right. Shall we start? Okay. Yeah. So,
so you were saying
so Draco,
about
Crabbe,
coercion.
Malfoy trio. Draco's the follower, the leader. The others are following, and you see the same dynamic with Voldemort and the Death Eaters. You came to me out of fear, not loyalty. Right. Where were you all this time? And like you were saying, Katrina, about like if you do anything wrong, I'm going to annihilate you. So I think you see not only that patterns in leadership, where Dumbledore is leading by example, showing that he's making difficult decisions, he's being transparent and telling the kids about the sort of the threat and the fear that, you know, Voldemort is generating, and being clear about it, even though the Ministry told him not to, but that they're deserving of it.
Right.
And similarly, you see the parallels in the friendships and the triad.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think your point about Harry being kind of isolated in this movie made me think of, you know, kind of the side larger character, Professor Moody, who we know, you know, is not the real Moody, but how he kind of takes Harry under his wing, and it feels, you know, a little bit stretch, but like a little grooming. He like
Yeah.
sees this opportunity. He's like fostering this connection and being so helpful and giving him all this support. And then we, later learn that it's nefarious. He's working for Voldemort to kind of help Harry send him to his death. But I think it's just interesting, not, if you were to read the book for the first time or see the movie for the first time, like you don't know that. And you just see this wonderful, again, adult who feels really helpful, who is, a master of disguise.
Yeah. Who at first I thought had a drinking problem and was like sneaking sips out of his flask. And then it wasn't until the end that I remembered, yes, the polyjuice. Like that's what he's doing, because again, as it turns out, it's Barty Crouch Jr., who is, using the polyjuice to impersonate Moody, again, for those nefarious reasons. And again, that's like another, gosh, I feel like Harry probably has PTSD by this point. I kind of feel like some of those visions or dreams throughout the movie, I remembered what they were because I've, read the books recently, but I was like, these could be trauma nightmares. Like, I'm starting to worry a little bit about Harry, and like, he's having a really hard time trusting people, obviously. And I also felt like we saw in this movie, he's starting to feel a little unsure about himself, like when they're in the maze with Cedric and he has that moment where he's like, "Ooh, I want to go get the cup and leave him behind." Like we see him sort of really feel that impulse for the first time and be faced with, are you going to do that and let Cedric die or get hurt? Or are you going to go save him? And then we see him save him, but then sadly Cedric still dies. But we start to see that even within Harry, that good and bad. Or I don't know if you'd call it good or bad, but just those impulses, that competitive drive. And I think that again is like so spot
Decisions,
on
right? Like we
developmentally.
said, how do you make those difficult decisions?
Yeah.
And what's important again for him was loyalty. Despite I don't know how angry he felt at Cedric for like
True.
for Cho for going with Cedric to the Yule Ball.
Right. But he's not a narcissistic person. So he can, hold on to that feeling of jealousy or anger or whatever about that and still save Cedric.
Yeah. Yeah, we love to see people doing multiple things at once in their heads, holding, multiple truths, and also like we see his values, right? So he can still be maybe jealous or, bummed, disappointed that Cho likes Cedric, or went with him to the Yule Ball, but also then that like he values, loyalty, or he values friendship, or he values connection, or he values even the fact that Cedric is at Hogwarts with him, right? So they're the school loyalty. We're in this together against, Fleur and
Durmstrang and
yeah.
Right.
And I think it also shows you what different friends bring to your life. Like Neville was always sort of downplayed, and yet he came and helped Harry with his knowledge. And we always rely on Hermione for her knowledge and Ron for his faithfulness and something and bravery at times. And so seeing what different, it's not always like, oh, it's the popular kid or it's the friend that helps you most, but that other people have different kinds of strengths, and Harry sort of started to draw on and value the gifts that people bring him in his life.
Yeah. And I know we all remember in the end Neville has a really big role. And I love, rewatching the films now to sort of see his character evolve over time and how important it'll be. And I was really moved rewatching this movie this time around when Neville got really upset about the curses, and we start to learn why. And again, we see that like even with Moody demonstrating these curses and it really bothering the kids, it really bothered Hermione that they were hurting whatever the animal was.
Spider, I think.
Yeah. And again, it's just like Moody kept doing it anyway. And I don't think that was the real Moody, right? Like that was probably, now we know, Barty Crouch Jr., who has that sort of sadistic undertone to him. And I thought that in this movie, we really start to see Voldemort quite literally, right? Like he takes like a humanish form again. He's getting stronger, and we really see those sadistic sides, those sociopathic sides of Voldemort and even Barty Crouch Jr. really coming through in like a real eerie way.
Yeah, and I think that conflicts also with then what we see in some other Death Eaters who I don't know if they've entirely walked away, but like with the head of Durmstrang, what's his
Igor
name?
Kokorov, yeah.
Karkaroff? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, he's like showing Snape, you know, it's like, back, did you see that? Like my arm's moving, and you see what feels like he feels to me very different, you know, from like Lucius Malfoy. In like, you know, trying to, maybe I thought this belief one time and I got in too deep and now I'm out, but like I still, right, you have this ruthless leader, you know, no one really gets out. But I think that was like a good depiction of just like how far the spectrum can go on either end. We see a lot of snakes. So even with Barty Crouch, when he's kind of turned back into himself, you see his like tongue, right? Like moving
doing
out.
all the things.
Yeah. And I just thought that was so like, it was just like a good metaphor. Yeah. To like be like, oh, you know, he's Voldemort's, you know, he's part of that world. He's slimy, he's snake-like, he's conniving, sneaky. That
What
we
did
see
you
kind
guys
of throughout the movies.
Yeah. What did you feel about like watching it now with everything going on in the world around us, with leaders and violence and, gosh, you know, I'm not even referring to just one thing, sadly. There's just so much going on in the world. Like I felt like, especially with Durmstrang coming in and Beauxbaton's Academy coming in, you know, it had like all these elements of like we're saying, like loyalty, allegiance, but also I felt like this must be what it's like to be like in a gang, or like I felt like that a lot with the Death Eaters, and then thinking about current events. It's like, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
I think the overwhelming, sentiment was fear, where it's everywhere, and how sort of leaders capitalize on that, and anger. Completely different, but in one of the Star Wars books, Lord Sidious tells Darth Maul that anger is a living thing. Feed it and it will grow.
Yes.
I feel
really
like that
into
with
Star Wars
fear
in my house lately.
Just like fear breeding divisiveness, right? Fear about what mudbloods will do to the wizard world. And so, you know, we must squash them. We must, you know, kick them out. We must kill them even. And I think that speaks to, right, like current events, the world, with just like people promoting fear against different types of people, different populations, and then what breeds of that. You know, if we fear something, we probably don't want to be near it. We probably don't like it. And then, you know, conflict seems to come from that. But
and how someone like Voldemort, you know, it seems like I find myself wondering, like, does Voldemort really believe that, like, about the mudbloods, or does he just want power? And he's capitalizing on other people's fear, manipulating everyone to get to the top at all costs, like in a very sociopathic way.
Right. Because he is a half-blood, right? Which I think is so ironic.
Interesting.
We just recorded an episode on Ashley Madison, like the documentary on the website where you can have an affair. And we talked about the CEO of that company, who, you know, in the movie says that he's not, he would never have an affair. You know, he's very happy in his marriage. And then all this stuff comes out that he's like been with many different people, much younger than himself, like a little icky. But that reminds me of Voldemort in just that, like, you're two-faced. You're like selling this one service, this one idea, this one, you know, thought, way of thinking or seeing the world, when you yourself are a half-blood. Like,
So
it's
just like, is it that you just can't, or just like you just can't accept that in yourself?
Right.
So you have to, it's like some huge like trauma reaction, but it just, exactly. That it just like annihilates everyone else.
And
Real
then you
scary.
also think about like death. Like Cedric's death, when you think about it, was just so tragic and pointless. And then how Dumbledore sort of in the end, in a way, uses Cedric to say, don't make it pointless. It's a call to action. Like next time you're faced with that choice of between what's right and easy, think about Cedric. And in a way, it sort of
Right.
elevates and gives meaning and purpose to that death. I could see that
Right.
very easily translated into the many million pointless deaths that are happening around the world right now.
Yeah. Right. And how it is, human nature to try to find the meaning in tragedy and in, pointless or helpless tragedies. And that often, I think, as we, probably in all of our individual work, and I'm also thinking in our recent conversation with Jenny Hubbard, when you can do that and find something to come from it, it's a path to healing. Not the only path, of course, but it can be a path to healing after some huge tragedy. And I really found myself even though I know how this all ends, really worried for Harry that he's going to blame himself for Cedric's death because he told him, like, let's grab it together, that he didn't just go on his own. And it's like, that's got to be so confusing for him, right? That, I could see how he might start to wonder, like, is it my fault? Or, did I have given into that impulse of wanting to be the winner that would have spared him? How confusing is that to think it's doing the right thing to be loyal and getting it together, and then this awful thing happens? Like, gosh, so confusing. I really feel like Harry needs some good old trauma therapy. I don't know if they offer that at
You have good
Hogwarts, but I
mentors.
recommend
That's
we look
halfway.
into it.
But I also liked how
Yeah.
like they really
That's
spelled
true.
out the unforgivable curses, like what is really unforgivable. And that was like the Imperious curse, which is like depriving someone of their free will. And then the Cruciatus curse to like torture someone, and then Avada Kedavra to kill someone or murder someone. Like these are unforgivable. Like it's like a code
Right.
almost there. This is the line. Yeah.
This is the line. Yeah. Gosh. And yeah, again, thinking about current events, like, whoa.
And art just like imitating life, I think we spoke with the playwright Dan O'Brien, who wrote a play about Newtown, and I think it's like even within these movies, I don't know obviously the J.K. Rowling's process or what she was putting out there intentionally or not, but I think art, writing books or creating movies or plays or poetry or whatever it is, like is a way that we process these huge conundrums in life or these huge conflicts and tragedies, and can make meaning of them, can help with community grieving, can help with community processing, can make us feel a sense of togetherness.
Even
and
like funerals, like we see
Exactly.
over with Cedric. Like I thought that was really wise to have a ceremony for him with all the other kids who witnessed this.
Yeah.
Like they all have this shared trauma now. I mean, just seeing like everyone cheering, all the happy music, and then it dawning on their faces, like just really sent shivers down my spine. They all just masterfully depicted that. And Harry's intense grief, not wanting to let Cedric go, seeing his dad run it. I was like, I can't watch this anymore.
Yeah. Oh,
good acting. I mean, not to lighten the mood, but
and I think
yeah.
Looking at current affairs too, one of the things it highlighted in a very interesting way was the role of media, like Rita Skeeter, like the embellishment and the lies.
Yes.
And how you can take
Yes.
something and twist it and present it. I thought that was just so on point.
Yes.
I love that you brought that up. Yes.
I love Rita Skeeter. I mean, I don't love her, but I love her, right? Like as her character. And I felt so bad for Hermione that of course it's the girl who's being like, manipulated and all the stuff out there about her romantic life and misunderstood. It was just so great.
Yeah.
And I guess Harry too. Yeah.
Well, everyone's looking for like their story, right? To like sensationalize or to get the most, in the movie of a newspaper, right? Like just like maybe buys or reads, but now it's like clicks. Like how
would
can
totally be an
sensationalize
influencer
Yeah.
these days, Rita Skeeter.
Oh yeah.
What did you all think about the pensieve and how I just like love rewatching these movies, but how it gave Harry like a window in to seeing more background about what's actually going on. But then I also thought like, wow, it was so interesting to see Dumbledore just like take his memories out and put them there for safekeeping. And I just, again, thinking about like trauma or hard things in life we don't really want to look at, like I think some of us might think like that would be nice. I know there's patients who come to see me who've had trauma in their life who wish they had a Pensieve where they could just take it out and put it away.
Also seeing another perspective, you know, I think like how powerful is that, being able to really see through someone else's eyes, you know, truths where it's like, you know, someone could tell you a story, but we're always missing, of course, you know, the details, that the feeling, the, you know, what really was happening there for that person to see. And I think, you know, seeing trial and, you know, again, in later movies, which we'll get to, but seeing like more background on Snape, I think it really helps us have other just shifting perspectives and are more open to holding multiple truths at the same time. Again, I love it. It's one of my favorite parts, I think, of the Harry Potter world. I wish that it was real in some ways.
I know that we could see that.
Yeah, and what a useful tool to like, okay, like let's, you know, at the end of maybe doing a trauma session, like, you know, sometimes we do some visualization of like boxing the trauma piece up so that you can kind of safely re-enter the world and are not as dysregulated. And like, how cool to, if you're a Harry Potter fan, maybe to like picture taking out that memory for safekeeping, leaving it at your therapy office where you know you're going to keep working on it, and then, you know, maybe at the next session taking it out again.
Oh my God.
In a
we
way,
are
absolutely.
the Pensieve.
Yeah.
We are.
Oh, how lovely is that? Well, you know, and I can see also that another perspective, which is it creates the context, like you said, in the background. But personally, for me, I was thinking I really need a Pensieve because of all the things that we have to hold in our minds and the cognitive load. That would be nice to like not forget it, but just be able to offload some of the multiple things that you hold in your head all day. But also, we distort how we remember things based on our emotions, based on our cognitive understanding of the event at that time. And a lot of times people misinterpret and hold on to those misinterpretations. And so I think it's just interesting to objectively see what had happened and be able to revisit that. And I think that's also very important for trauma, that or things that people carry with them in terms of like perceived guilt, or kids that make temporal relationships with something bad happening with something that they did when in truth it wasn't. But to be able to actually, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's fantasy to be able to go back and say, you know, that's not exactly what happened. It was something very different. But how healing that could be to say, I can review something, an event with a different perspective, a new lens that does not distort, and I can make new meaning out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, thinking about trauma, how it's, you know, that dissociation can be so common when you're going through something traumatic. I just thought this was an interesting, like, not a parallel, not an opposite, just like a different take. Like, gosh, I wish we could do that for people, you know, like have them sort of, again, witness it objectively in a safe way. I think that is what a lot of trauma therapy tries to do the best we can.
Yeah.
And so we really see how powerful that is when it is done safely.
Even like the visual of like putting your head in and taking it out. It's like, that's what we do in trauma treatment. We, you know, help guide a person to, however, you know, the treatment protocol works, to experience it in some way. Exactly. And then we kind of pull you back out and we're like, okay, we're present. Like you're back in Dumbledore's office. Like, you know, ideally you're in a therapy setting and you are safe, not, you know, you're still dealing with all the tragedy that Harry is. But I love the visual of it so much. It's
the holding space.
Yes.
Right. Exactly. I love thinking of us as a
carry that with me now.
Me too. Me too. Any other thoughts that we wanted to touch on before we start to wrap up?
I think now that we have like Cedric dying in the end, I think that's the theme that's going to sort of shape our next movies and books about all the losses that are now going to start happening for Harry. And yet seeing the strength of the friendships that he's building for I think Harry in particular, and Ron and Hermione, this was the first bit of fracture in their relationship for all three of them. And yet they showed the capacity to repair it and navigate it and sort of focusing what was important to each of them, and making a choice we're friends and we're staying together. That's going to play out when, again, that friendship and bravery is tested again in the upcoming books.
Right. And it's so nice that they can each individuate and come back to each other, right? Like you're saying, they can each like take these little steps or explore themselves and come back. And I loved the way it ended when Hermione was looking at them and saying, you know, everything's going to change now, isn't it? And they all like recognize that. And that's so it was like really beautiful. And I was really impressed at how those three actors could act that like as children, like just in such a big way. It was really impressive. And I love how Hermione's like, you guys will write to me every day, right? Like I'm going to miss you. And Ron, again, their attachments come out, right? Where he's like, no way. And then you see Harry kind of unsure, like, well, sure, Hermione, like, I don't know. But it was like really beautiful. I thought,
So
way
in
to end
essence,
the movie.
we were talking about a whole movie about bravery and friendship and making those difficult choices. Those are all the
Yeah, navigating adolescence while there's conflict going on, you know, I mean, makes it hard to experience, you know, even normal typical things that are so hard for kids, and then light up like a conflict, or, you know, being unsafe, you know, we see how that can be detrimental.
Make it even harder.
Yeah.
Yes. No, thank you.
Well, thank you,
you
Zheala, for
again.
joining us
This was
once
great.
again. We always love to hear your takes. And I saw that you're either about to speak at a conference or you just did about fairy tales. So that's like super
It was
cool.
wonderful.
You just did. How did it
talked about
go?
fairy tales, and we also talked about how fairy tales might be similar, but come in sort of different flavors around different countries, and it could still be the same. Like Cinderella exists in so many different cultures in its own way, and then also how it's evolved into modern fairy tales like Harry Potter, and how our characters are now changing and our protagonists are changing, and it's not about understanding like here are the monsters, but also I think we're shifting about how we're understanding the complexity of villains, of how they became to do so when it was like evil witch, whatever, but now we have Wicked and we have Maleficent and thinking about their stories. And then also how we're shifting from roles
I love
to
that.
the less gendered roles and now being much more inclusive.
Yes. Awesome. Well, I mean, that being said, we do have a lot of exciting movies coming out this summer. You mentioned Wicked. I bet you're as excited as us for Inside Out 2. My gosh, we have a good like summer of movie lineups coming out. So I can't wait to hear your thoughts about those too.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you again. And everyone, you can follow Zheala Qayyum, Dr. Q, at Zeek on Instagram, ZHEEQUE, right? I think I'm spelling it right. And you can find us at Analyze Scripts Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm sure, I know we're going to ask you to come back for Harry Potter 5, 6, and 7, both parts. So we will catch you again next Monday with a new episode. And please feel free to listen to our prior Harry Potter episodes and stay tuned as we keep working our way through the series.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.